This episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast is brought to you entirely by fan support. To help keep the series ad-free, get early access and bonus features, browse gear and apparel, join the community, or watch the series come to life in living color, you can check out the links in the description. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Sharp, and today we're talking about finding hope for the future. This came up because I was sitting in discussion with some friends after a workout, and they were all talking about it's like things are just looking so down, so like and it was. Everyone was just kind of like, oh, things are looking rough. It's raining and it's too hot and there's a war and blah, 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 blah. Then I went home and I was looking at it and I was like, wow, like you just see all across, all across the channels of, especially like when I follow news on Reddit specifically, it's like, all of my channels, everyone's like, oh, it's all disaster. Oh, everything's crazy. And I don't know, we just live in an era of doom scrolling. And it's for a complicated reason. It's not because humans are just, innately, want to do that. I've actually worked behind the analytics. I've been the guy sitting behind the screen with a dashboard looking at your data aggregated and telling me what kind of content produces the most engagement, produces the most clicks, and produces the most ad revenue. And I'll tell you, controversial and terrifying certainly sell almost as good as sex does. So you have, a bunch of, every media conglomerate, blogger, and influencer are all looking at these algorithms, the way that our brains work, and they've got a choice. They're like, do I make insane amounts of money, making people feel emotional and scared, and try to rationalize that everybody else is doing the same thing, and that I'm just playing the game, as it were, or in the case of other forms of news, do you choose to report calmer, more balanced, more nuanced reports, and content that might get lost in the shuffle, or at best develop sort of a niche following? And I'll tell you, most people have decided to monetize terror. That's without even getting into propaganda machines like Fox News and other organizations. And now, anyway, before we jump ahead, I do try to stay non-political on this show, or rather, I try to present my political opinions in a way that won't immediately turn people off, because people are so used to the combative nature of politics, which I absolutely get sucked into. Now, I have friends all across the political spectrum. At least in terms of ideology, they now have, at least in the U.S., sort of grouped onto one side of the, on side of the divide, because they're reasonable humans who follow facts. And speaking of facts, I do believe that every opinion and every, person's thoughts are valid and worth at least examining. On the other hand, you do also have to call things straight and live in reality. And the reality is that Fox News was explicitly founded to spin right-wing politics in the U.S. after Watergate. And they've literally argued in court that they don't need to be truthful because, they are, quote, an entertainment network, and, quote, no, or paraphrasing actually, no reasonable person would believe what they're saying. And look it up. There are actual stories here. So it's not even I'm just slinging mud here. It's these are literally things that Fox News said. I don't know what okay, sorry. Sometimes I get worked up. I just, I do believe that there's a balance between showing empathy and, ignoring reality. But without getting too much into that and without getting too worked up, you now have a global discourse that's dominated by fear, which is partially because people can't look away, and partially because some evil motherfuckers with billions of dollars are desperately trying to turn lower class people against each other, because that's how they stay in power. And that's literally only one skew of how the world is fucked. The class divide now. You've got environmental shit. You've got war. You've got hate towards LGBTQ people. You've got religious extremism, politics, and all of those are all the same in politics sometimes. Like, I mean, pick your poison and you can find a million reasons to say that we're all fucked. And sometimes it's hard to keep going, and it can be a lot harder to even find reasons to hope. And it's funny to me because when you actually look at a ton of measures, we live in the most enlightened, most prosperous, most advanced, least violent, most connected global civilization that has ever existed. And like, you know, obviously now social media has become a massive tool for division and subjugation, and AI is probably coming right behind that because you're giving, you know, one person the power of, you know, armies of people, and, you know, that's when you create power imbalances. But I don't know. In the face of all that, it actually does give me a weird sense of hope that so many people in power are spending so much money and effort trying to keep the rest of humanity down in the dumps, that it's like, because they've got to be scared. You know, it's certainly a battle right now, but there's no way that like the haves, and, you know, that can be whoever you represent. It can be people with political power, you know, privilege power, financial power, you know, military power, whoever you choose, whoever the haves, like, would not be fighting so hard to keep the have-nots down if they weren't scared of good people and how close good people are always to just washing away all their bullshit. So anyway, that's kind of how I find hope on a global scale. It's kind of a weird thing of, it's like, oh, well, because terrible, incredibly powerful people are working so hard to keep, you know, the average human being down, it's like, they must be doing it for a reason. That must mean that if we keep working, they're gonna, you know, it's gonna be a lot of trouble. So I don't know. And, you know, I also find goodness within my own small community, and, you know, I don't know. Like, as a whole in life, the world has grown so large and complex that not all of us will change the entire planet. But I do think that we can all change the good of our life and be active in societal change and improve the community around us, and, you know, and that's a start. And I think that's where we can find hope in this world that grows increasingly more complicated, is finding the things that we can do in our daily life that move us towards justice and liberty and, you know, freedom and equality and understanding, you know, and seek out and, you know, work on and brighten up the places where those areas are not so, you know, those things are not so strong. You know, there's actually a scene in season 2 where Cyrus deals with an issue much like this, of kind of that, how do you find hope in a world that's very much larger than you? And I'll be interested to see how you guys react when the season comes out. It's an interesting discussion that Cyrus gets to take place in, so I hope you guys get to enjoy a little bit of that. Anyway, that's it for today. Much love to all of you guys as always, and take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast, which is brought to you entirely by fan support. To help keep the series ad-free, get early access and bonus features, browse gear and apparel, join the community, or watch the series come to life in living color, you can check out the links in the description.